Previously, on parts 1 through 3 of our Jeep Grand Cherokee project, we purchased a completely stock 1994 Jeep Grand Cherokee and over the past 2 years have added a lift, new tires, roof rack, transfer case, and numerous other upgrades as we continue to build up the Jeep to handle the off-road trips we throw at it. Today, everything breaks and we need to set out to do some routine maintenance to keep the Jeep running in tip-top shape. We'll replace the water pump, fan clutch, fuel injectors, brakes, and a few other things along the way. Let's face it, this Jeep rolled off the factory floor 22 years ago. 150,000 miles later, some of those original components are beginning to fail. In the middle of some of our other modifications, the Jeep suddenly developed a substantial coolant leak that needed to be addressed. We identified the problem as a failing water pump and immediately set out to fix the problem. In order to get the water pump out, it turns out you need a really big wrench. So, we set out to buy a really big wrench and proceeded with the work. You'll definitely make a mess when you pull the water pump, but the process itself is fairly simple. You'll need to remove the fan shroud, fan, alternator, and a few other hoses and items to pull the pump. We popped in the new pump and decided to put in a new fan clutch since we had everything pulled apart already. The failing components had certainly seen better days. After putting everything back together, we topped off the coolant and let the Jeep warm up. Since replacing both the fan clutch and the water pump, the airflow off the Jeep is noticeably stronger, and the Jeep runs much cooler on the hot Arizona days so far. The next order of business was to replace the fuel injectors. They weren't bad, but they certainly weren't brand new either. After having issues with the low idle and check engine light codes over a year ago, we decided it was finally time to replace the old injectors. Removing the injectors is very simple and involves removing the fuel rail and pulling each injector off the rail. The old injectors were quite gunked up and obviously in pretty bad shape. The new injectors feature a multi-point injection system rather than the single hole on the old injectors. We popped them in place on the fuel rail and put everything back together. We went to fire up the Jeep when all of a sudden we sprung a leak. In our removal of the fuel rail, it turns out we had twisted the connection line between the left and right rail, and once fuel pressure increased during the ignition process, it forced a pinhole leak. Having fuel spraying into the engine bay meant that we had to park the Jeep and work to figure out a solution. After hours of research and several $100s later, we were forced to buy a completely new fuel rail direct from Jeep. We then pulled off the old rail, undoing most of the work we had just done a few days before, and put in the new fuel rail. Once again, we put everything back together and went to start the Jeep, hoping for no more fuel leaks. Upon start, everything turned out fine and the Jeep purred like a kitten with its new fuel injectors and an intentional new fuel rail. Whether the new fuel injectors will actually make a difference in performance and gas mileage will only be determined in the coming months. Getting back to items that needed attention on the Jeep, we needed to put new front brakes on. The squealing and screeching of our current brakes was getting old, and it was time for them to be replaced. In what is another fairly straightforward job, we pulled the Jeep in the garage. After pulling off the wheels, we removed the old brake discs and pads and slapped on the new ones. It was pretty clear that this job needed to be done very soon. We tightened everything back up, bled the fluid through, and replaced the wheels. Of course, once we fix one thing, another one breaks. So in order to get the Jeep out of the garage, we had to replace the dead battery. We opted for a high-performance yellow top Optima battery that's supposedly good for up to 3 years. And with that, a lot of routine maintenance on the Jeep has been done, and everything is running a lot stronger. Those old and tired parts have now been replaced with updated and new components, and the Jeep is ready to continue on down the road and trail. Until the next Jeep Grand Cherokee project video, we'll see you guys.